The opinions expressed by tonight's guest do not represent the opinions or position of Spaced Out Radio, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with SOR Media. Listener discretion is advised. Come own the night with us. Stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
We're watching. We watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
It's Thursday, December 28th, Friday, December 29th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond, and this is Spaced Out Radio. I hope you've had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, live from the Great White North in the Caribou region, on top of the snowy mountains of central British Columbia, right here, buried in Spaced Out Radio headquarters. I want to say hello to everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe, FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listeners. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. You can follow us all over social media, starting off with Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show, on Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott SOR. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. All you got to do is go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Hit the subscribe button. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website, of course, is spacedoutradio.com. Now, we have a GoFundMe account going on right now. We'd appreciate if you could hop on in. We're trying to raise funds to improve our studio setup and our broadcast system. Head to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. This will help us get quicker onto terrestrial radio, which we are starting to work on very efficiently. Now, if you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, you can go to our Spaced Out Radio store and do a little shopping. Read the Encounter online, dealing with everything paranormal, strange, and odd. Read up on my latest blog there as well. We also have great videos from Tim Doyle's UFO Seekers and Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV. Now, tonight on the show, we are going down a dark and dreary road that ends with over 900 very good people dead. And decades later, the question as to how one man and the talk of God could convince so many people to forgo everything in their life, including breathing. You don't want to drink the Kool-Aid on this one, and no, I'm not saying that sarcastically. It's actually quite sad. The People's Temple Agricultural Project, better known by its informal name, Jonestown, was a remote settlement established by the People's Temple and leader Reverend Jim Jones in Guyana on November 18, 1978. A total of 909 individuals died in Jonestown, all but 2 from apparent cyanide poisoning, in an event termed Revolutionary Suicide by Jones and some members on audio tape of the event. The poisonings followed the murder of 5 others by Temple members, including U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan, an act that Jones had ordered. However, the massacre also had its survivors. Laura Johnston Kohl was one of the lucky ones to make it out alive. And it's because of Laura, tonight we're going to have a rare, first-hand account of this tragedy that will be turning 40 years old next year. Laura's book is called Jonestown Survivor, An Insider's Look. Laura, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Spaced Out Radio. I am very much looking forward to the next 2 hours that you will be with us. And I want to say thank you for being able to share this story, because to survive anything horrific like this had to really define your life.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I think that all of us ended up, even me today, ended up with a lot of questions. And so I think discussion and trying to research where things went wrong or how they went wrong, I think we all need to figure that out, because every day we meet the kinds of challenges of figuring out what's truth and what's fiction. So I think it's a lesson that we still need to practice, because we haven't gotten good at finding out what works and what doesn't these days.
Well, let's start right at the beginning. How did you get involved with Jim Jones? How old were you at that time?
I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was in high school in the decade of the 60s, and that was the decade when vigilantes really tried to take over our government by shooting leaders. They shot at John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. They killed Medgar Evers and many other leaders. And I was at that formative time that I thought, you could make a difference in the world. You could make it better. You could kind of assert yourself and make sure that people were treated properly. And then I saw that, and really it just shook my foundation at that point. And then we started in the war in Vietnam, and I saw people I went to high school with killed in a country that I could hardly find on the map. So first of all, I strayed. I went to college. I also tried going to Woodstock to see if maybe getting stoned was going to make me feel, more involved. That didn't work for me. I'm the wrong type of person. I worked with the Black Panthers in Connecticut while I was in college and after college to see if the free breakfast could make me feel like I was making a difference in the community. Eventually, my sister talked me into moving in with her in San Francisco, California. And I had taken many wrong turns. And so she brought me out to California, and she had heard about Jim Jones through some lawyers that she was working with. As somebody who ran a really egalitarian community, it was totally interracial, had a mixture of, socioeconomic levels and education levels. And there were people who were dedicated to making a difference in the world, and they were willing to make some sacrifices. And so I joined up thinking that Jim Jones was an articulate spokesperson for trying to get the world right, fixing what was wrong. So I was about 22.
Okay. And let's be honest with you, Jim was doing at the time what no one or very few in the United States were doing at that time. And that was treating everybody like human beings. Like you said, there was no color. There was no race. It was about humans helping humans the way it was supposed to be.
That's exactly right. And so we were retrained. I mean, we had lived, I had lived through the 50s where there was still segregation, where many places in the South had water fountains for blacks and water fountains for whites, and schools were segregated. So we lived in a segregated time where there was a lot of racism. And what Jim Jones retrained us to see is that that was not going to work. That's not a way to move forward. And so it wasn't that we ignored race, we embraced differences and didn't go into things thinking, oh, I'm high and mighty, I have, a lot of things to offer. We went in thinking, okay, how are we going to collaborate? how are we going to mix and appreciate each other and make this interracial family and move forward and make a change in our society. So you're right. He was one of the first ones. He adopted children of all different races. He had 6 children. Some were adopted black child, Jimmy Jones Jr., and then children from Asia, Asian background. So he had adopted all, races in his family, and he brought other people into People's Temple from every background.
Why the perceived love in such a dysfunctional time? Did he feel that that was the way to get closer to God? Was the message about God, or was it about creating, something else where, as Canadian Joe on Twitter says, being a wolf in sheep's clothing very early?
I think that really from day one in his life, at whatever point he matured, I think he was always an opportunist. And I think that if that fit in with something he thought was right, I think that he did believe in integration. He did believe in, having a variety of people in a group, of, not segregating people, but he was number one an opportunist. And that was the period of time in the United States where people were beginning to say, okay, in a way, we've had enough of segregation. We've had enough of this separate and being unequal. And so I think he just saw that it was his time. And I think that that's probably why he moved from Indiana, where, it was kind of the heart of Ku Klux Klan territory. That message was not something that was going to get him any kind of powerful position in Indiana. He moved to California. He moved, right outside of San Francisco and Berkeley and Oakland. And in the late 60s, that's when the Black Panthers Party started in Oakland. That's when the American Indian movement was getting active. Cesar Chavez was involved with, changing the Bracero program and having more farm workers' rights. So Jim Jones rode in on his, white horse because he was white. In a way, the power structure was okay with having a white man go in. No matter how radical he was, they didn't have to fear him like they might have to fear what the Black Panthers were doing. So he met all their criterion. He was practical, he was hands-on, he was radical, but he was still a minister and he was still white. And so he just used that in every way to be a spokesperson as if he represented everybody in the community, because he saw that as an opportunity for his own, absorbing more and more power in the community.
Did he treat everybody with equality in the church, or did he, was there some sort of barrier between, say, whites and Latinos and African Americans?
He treated everybody with dignity in public. So he would be the kind of person that if you were doing some work around the church, you were emptying trash cans or cooking or something like that, he would be sure to go and notice everybody who was putting forth effort to keep People's Temple floating and moving forward. In his personal life, though, he had a group of mistresses and secretaries, and they were almost all white. In the United States, they were all white, mostly women. And in Guyana, he, for the very first time, had a partner, or tried to have a partner who was a person of color, who was black, but primarily in his personal life, in the part that was not public, that was like the behind the facade and the trappings of religion, his inner circle was white.
Let us learn a little bit about the church. You went in at 22 years old. You decided to join. And from what you stated just a few minutes ago, you were a lost young adult trying to find your way. You were against the Vietnam War. You had friends who fought and died over there. You were trying to find your own place on where you fit in. During that time, because I got to admit, I wasn't alive. I was born in 1973, so I missed the 60s. And, and so during that time, what was it like being so lost and not knowing where to turn?
I think that, just looking back, it seemed to me that I I tried to figure out what my role was. Like I went out, I graduated from high school. I went to college. I tried being involved with the student, programs on campus, the Student League for Human Rights and SDS and different groups. It seemed like everything that I tried to do, my voice was just a whisper in the wilderness. And so no matter what I tried to do, if I demonstrated in New York, which I did against the war, and I got tear gassed, and the dog, my friend and I were in New York, and we got tear gassed, and we had to protect her dog that we were walking with. And I just think that, I kept trying to see how could I be effective in making my voice heard in this country that was so lethargic in getting over this segregation, and was so lethargic in listening to people trying to, to create a community where everybody had dignity and everybody was taken care of. And so when left to my own devices, the things I tried were not effective. They didn't work. And when I met Jim Jones, I said, here's somebody who behaved like a protector. He had his own children, adopted children, and other children in the church wanted to join his family, wanted to change their last names to Jones. So somehow I perceived him as a protector that would even protect me against myself if I made another lousy choice. And he had all his friends, or all the people he referred to, were my heroes again, Angela Davis and Cesar Chavez and Dennis Banks. So all the people of that era who had stepped forward after the catastrophic deaths in the 60s, somehow Jim Jones had conversations with them, and he really persuaded us that he was going to be an effective leader, and we wouldn't just be ignored because we were whispering into the wilderness. He was going to take charge of it and move us forward in a public way. And so we felt confident that here's somebody who's charismatic, yes, but he lived it. He had this beautiful family, his own primary family, and he had this beautiful family in the church. So he seemed to live it, not just talk about it.
What was the financial background of a lot of people who were in there? Were most people in financial destitution? Were there wealthy, well-off people there? Was it more middle class? What was the financial scenario?
Well, when I moved in, I was not employed. So when I moved into Redwood Valley, where People's Temple was located, I moved in without a job, and then I got a job at the welfare department, and I worked there for 7 years. Because I was living communally, as were many of the young people who moved in, many of whom had also been through some of the experiences I had been through, trying to figure out how to have a voice in the world at that time. We went to work and we turned in our checks and lived communally. So the temple would take care of all of our needs, pay our car insurance, get us cars, clothes, all of that, and then our checks would go into the general fund. So we had a lot of people living communally, and that grew. As Jim's importance and kind of role in the community grew, more people came around who had money, and many people would donate to Jim so that they could get his ear or, get his attention. And so over the years, as he got more powerful and had more prestige, especially in San Francisco and Los Angeles, many people made donations to the temple. And he had a whole healing ministry. Part of his upbringing had been with the tabernacles that moved around the Midwest. And so he was involved in the healing ministries. He learned a lot of his techniques in that setting. So he would have healing services where people would, want to buy a healing cloth for somebody who was ill, or ask him to pray for people. And so we had an enormous letter writing program that people would write in and ask him to heal their relatives, and people would make donations. So all of those different things, but more and more people would make donations and tithing, and people would turn over properties to him or jewelry or other things they had, because he was, his message was live simply, give your money to the church so it can expand the services. So, and he took a very tough offering every time he was in a meeting, he took a very tough offering. If you left with a dime in your pocket, you were doing better than I ever was.
Was it about religion? Was it about, getting closer to God? Or was it about trying to live in a sect where you didn't have to follow the government's rules, or you didn't have to, you're basically living off the grid inside the temple?
I would say that Jim always promoted practical Christianity. So the Christian work ethic was absolutely, we all worked many, many, many hours. We were, often exhausted. And even some of the survivors say that part of our, part of our following his directions was that we were too exhausted to fight back or to have time to reflect on what was going on. But he definitely used the Bible to its max. He was a genius in the sense that he learned the Bible backwards and forwards, so he could have an argument about anything in the Bible and probably win. But in terms of what was the root of People's Temple, it was not religion. It was, like Matthew 25 would be feeding the hungry, clothing the naked. We would talk about the practical terms of Christianity or the practical terms of taking care of your fellow man. Jim used religion, but he was not in any way bound by religion, and he was not in any way interested in having people think that some God in the sky was going to come to them. He said, we're going to live it now. He said, if you're rich and white, you can have heaven on earth. If you're black and poor, they tell us to wait for the sweet by and by. But it's time for us to have heaven on earth like everybody else. We need to be treated decently. We need to have good housing, good laws, all these things that protect us. We need to be, living good lives here too. So he was not interested in having people have dreams about what might happen. He wanted people to be practical about what they needed right now.
What was the money used for? If you had all this money coming in, what was it there for?
A lot of the money ended up, when we were in Jonestown, a lot of the money ended up in bank accounts around South America and other parts of the world. Jim was a penny pincher. He had, his clothes were pretty much threadbare like other people in the temple. He didn't spend a lot of money, but we had a lot of money put away for a rainy day. Some of the survivors have had some discussion about that because some people felt that in Jonestown we didn't have enough food. And my sense of things was that Jim knew that whatever was going on in Guyana was somewhat temporary, and we weren't sure where we were going to go or what we were going to do. And he just held everything, all the money tightly in these bank accounts around the world that his secretaries and mistresses had deposited. So the money wasn't spent, carelessly. It was really contained. But that was one way, an additional way that Jim kept power over people. It turns out in 1972, when I was pretty new to the temple, Jim actually told one of his secretaries, keep them tired and keep them poor and nobody will ever leave. So nothing that happened in People's Temple was spontaneous or serendipitous. Everything was planned. So even the thing about money, he was very careful with money, and yet that was one more way he could have the power over people, by maintaining all the money in his, in his control, not in ours.
Were you allowed to leave the compound when you were in California?
Well, I worked every day. Like most of the people in Redwood Valley had jobs. Like 12 or 15 of us worked for the county of Mendocino and different jobs at the welfare department. And so we, there was no compound. There was one church that nobody lived in. And there were several houses on the property, but that was right on the road. So actually in all of California, there was no restriction of coming and going. And there was no one place where everybody lived. It was nothing like Jonestown.
What were the accommodations like?
Well, when I first moved in, I moved in with one of the assistant pastors. So with he and his wife had 3 kids, and so I lived with the family. They had a boarding care home, so part of their house was a licensed care home, and I lived in the other part with the family. And so it was, we ate wonderful food. Many people in the temple had family care homes, and they were always exceptionally clean. The people were taken care of well. They were, it was a really good program for all concerned. It was a win-win. The people who lived in the different communities loved it, and the people who took care of them really did wonderful jobs. So I lived there. Then I moved into the communes, and that was at the beginning of the kind of communal movement in People's Temple, where you would have just single individuals move into different communes. And so I would usually be living with anywhere from, 8 to 20 people, and we had either double or triple bunk beds. So we would have like 6 women in a room and a communal closet that had clothing that we shared, and then there'd be another room for the men and another room for, whatever the overflow was, if it was men or women. So it was almost like college dormitories, but much more crowded. So we would live in a house, but we would have triple bunks of 6 people or so in a room. So it was crowded, but we were never there except to sleep. We were kept so busy that we literally would get home, at midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning and be gone to work by 7:30 the next day. So our homes were not places to go and relax.
Were you segregated inside the compound, men on one side, women in the other? Or let's say if you came in as a husband and wife team, were you allowed to stay in the same room?
So most of the time, husbands and wives, they had their own houses. So these were mostly single. Actually, there was a period of time when I moved in that for that period of time from 1969 to about 1973, lots of young people, single young people with no kids, a lot of us moved in around the same time. So the bedrooms were segregated, but the houses were not. And there was no compound. Like there were about 5 or 6 different communes. And they were at some distance from the temple. So there was no one space. It wasn't like one college dormitory building. There were just different houses within the community of Redwood Valley.
Were you allowed to date? Were you allowed to have some sort of social life?
Jim's point always was, if you wanted to be in the most trusted positions in People's Temple, then you would not have somebody else between you and Jim Jones. So if you wanted to be considered the most dedicated or the most valued or the most committed person, you wouldn't date. So many of us did not date. Some did date. Some got married. Some had kids and everything. But I was in this inner circle, and I was pretty committed. I was a zealot. So for me, I didn't date. I think that if you talk to the survivors, there are about 60 survivors right now. I have to speak for myself because that's the only experience that I had with it. But if you talk to all 60 survivors and asked 100 questions, chances are you'd have the entire spectrum on almost every question. Did you date? Everything from absolutely not to, yes, I had the same lifestyle because I wasn't interested in being considered one of the, true followers. It was okay for me to be peripheral and still be in the temple because my family was there. So if you talk to all the survivors, you're going to have every possible point of view.
Did you enjoy living there? Was it fun, or was it just plain hard work? Did you feel after you entered that you couldn't leave? What was going through your mind emotionally as the years went on?
For me, I totally loved it. When I was in college, I was a philosophy major, and I really felt that I was like a fish out of water. apply to my life because I'm a very hands-on person. So when I moved into the temple, I worked at the welfare department, which was fine. I wrote letters to judges and lawyers and different people about getting people out of prison and getting people on probation or giving people the benefit of the doubt. So I wrote a lot of letters to try and, persuade judges to be lenient on different people. I was in part of the planning commission, People's Temple, so we kind of set some of the plans in motion that we had about it. And I drove a Greyhound bus all over the country, including Canada and Mexico, and we camped out in Mexico. So I had, my life was unpredictable enough to be really exciting. And it got me kind of out of it got me out of feeling that I needed to be in an academic setting, because my life, I felt like I was totally productive. I was like breaking through my own glass ceilings to do things. So I was never interested in leaving. Almost from the minute I came to the temple the first day, I really loved the lifestyle that I had. I loved living communally. I loved the work that I was doing and the different things that I could do that seemed to make a difference. So I was a zealot really from day one. But, the first time I went with my sister because she had told me about it. And, the very first day she said, his ego is just beyond anything she could tolerate. So, she was much more wise than I was at that point, and so I did not see it, but she did. So she left and never came back. And then I eventually moved in.
Were there a lot of people who came and went? Because, from an outsider's perspective, it really looks like once you were there, you were committed for pretty much life.
Well, because it was in California, there was easy access to leave. If you came one Sunday and said, well, I'm not interested in coming back, then you wouldn't come back. It was the longer you stayed, and in a way, the more committed you either got or were expected to be, there was a lot of pressure on people to leave. We did have people leave. I remember a woman left with her 3 children, and she really had to go into hiding. She felt she had to go into hiding when she left because Jim was really unforgiving, and when people wanted to leave, because of his narcissistic personality disorder or because of his dysfunction, he really thought that if somebody wanted to leave, it had to do with his failure in trying to make them see the point. And so he took it so personally as sort of a personal affront or a personal denial of what he was trying to do. He really worked tirelessly to get people to stay. And so it made it really difficult. So people who left, they snuck out or they left, but they didn't feel free to be still in the same community. So many left the whole community.
Did you have a lot of friends?
I don't know how many.
Go ahead, please.
I'm not sure like where many fits in. Like I would say, at one time People's Temple had probably 400 people in Redwood Valley, and at the largest time in San Francisco, there were probably 3 or 4 or more thousand people who considered themselves members. Whether they came every meeting or not was different, but who when they came to any church would come to People's Temple. And in Los Angeles, maybe 2,000 people considered themselves members, and they would come sometimes, but not all the time. And so really then 1,000 people altogether moved to Jonestown, and there were probably another 800 people in the United States who still came to hear the assistant ministers or Jim's wife Marceline when she was there. So, people did leave over the year, but the closer you got to Jim Jones and the inner circles of People's Temple, the onion that was People's Temple, because there were many, many circles, the closer you got into the center, the more difficult it was to leave.
Jim also, from what I have read, was a womanizer. He liked for a lack of a better term, really like to take advantage of the ladies inside the church. Did you notice this going on, that basically he was the sexual salvation of the commune?
He was actually the only allowed sexual partner in many parts of the temple. But, when I first met him, he talked a lot about loyalty, and his wife was very much present in every setting. So if he was at the podium, she would be listening to him and looking mesmerized by everything he was saying. It turned out even when I joined People's Temple, he already had a longtime mistress. And so over the years, he had always young white women. Sometimes the day after they turned 18, they would become his, sexual partner. But what he would do is, instead of admitting, okay, like my one fault is that I'm a womanizer, he would tell us in a planning commission meeting or in a setting, I had to have sex with this particular person because she thought she was so ugly. I had to explain to her, I had to show her how beautiful she was. So he would victimize the person one more time. You know what I mean? So instead of saying we had sex because we had sex or something more honest, he would always blame the victim of his sexual advances by saying she was suicidal, and so I had to have sex with her so she would feel better about herself. Or she was going to leave, and I had to tell her again that she really needed to stay, and I had to show her how beautiful she was. So he always had an excuse for why he would have sex. And then much of the sex was never talked about. So if you were wise and could figure it out, you could have put it all together. But I had no clue while I was in People's Temple that it was, as frequent, and how he had as many sexual partners as he had. I had no clue until People's Temple was all over. I had no clue that he had been involved in so many acts of sex with men and women.
This is almost like justifying rape, taking advantage of women who were destitute and, maybe a little morally inept in trying to figure out whom they were. That could constitute as rape.
That's exactly right. So he was not a pedophile, so he would wait until they were 18 years and a day old. But he picked people who were very naive and very, young, or people who, his longtime mistress was, a college graduate, very smart. He broke up her marriage with her husband. He married her. He then had sex with the former husband's new partner. He just really sleazy in many, many ways with the way he handled sex and the way he used and abused people in sex. It was just really horrific.
Was it a tryst of orgies where he would, take advantage of multiple women at numerous different times? Or was it very predatory?
I'd say predatory, and it was usually one woman at a time, as far as I know. I've never heard of any orgy or anything like that. It was always one woman at a time. But, the reality is that most of the people who were in that inner circle where his mistresses were, they all died in Jonestown. And so I have never heard about it, but I do think that there are certainly things that died with the people in Jonestown. We've found out many, many horrific things that were swept under the rug already. But I think that there is probably a lot more that went on that we'll never know about.
Were you surprised after the incident? We're going to get to the incident in hour number 2 and how you survived that. But in hour number 1 here, were you surprised after everything had happened how much information that you were able to find out as to what was really going on behind the scenes? And how did that affect your post-commune life?
I would say that probably every time I have a conversation with another survivor, I'm surprised again about some information that I didn't know. So I'm not as surprised at about that. I'm more surprised that I didn't see it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not surprised that there's information there. I'm just surprised that I was so oblivious to things. Like, I'm a smart person. How could I not have seen this abuse or not have, seen it for what it was? How could I have been so, unaware? I just don't know. So that's the part that surprises me. Not that so much went on, but that so much went on so close to me under my very nose. That's what surprised me.
So getting back to previous, you got there in around 1972. You were there for 6 years. What kept you there? What kept you going there? Was it a sense of family that maybe you had never felt before?
So actually, I moved in March. My first time at People's Temple was in March of 1970, and then I moved into Redwood Valley in August of 1970, and I worked up in Redwood Valley for 7 years at the welfare department. So I guess the part that left me is I was enchanted with, being part of a civil rights and human rights group that was totally integrated. I was living the way I wanted to live. I was living in a setting with people I loved, people who were committed and dedicated to making the world better. So I was with a group of people who I just admired so much. And so I was with them. And then, I saw that we were doing things. We were getting people out of prison. We were getting, people who didn't have enough money to eat and find housing. We were getting them into communes so they could live that way. I saw kids who were having horrible trouble in school get tutored or get moved into a house where they had some supervision and some support and things like that. So every day I would see wonderful things that were going on under the umbrella of what People's Temple was doing. And my life was exciting. I thought so many times as a philosophy major, driving a Greyhound bus across the country. It was just exhilarating. It was fun. It was certainly not anything that I had pictured for myself growing up, as I, was a person of privilege. My mother had a college education. My father did. They were divorced, but, I lived a good life. I had everything I needed growing up, but I wanted to live in this kind of a utopian community where people took care of each other. It was diverse. I grew up in a white community. I am white. I didn't want to live in that, in an all-white community that, it just clones of me living together seemed so boring to me. So every day was interesting, and every day I did things that I never thought I would do. And it was just exciting. Every day was exciting to me.
What was your family's reaction when you joined this commune? Did they realize it was a cult?
Well, I had made a series of really bad decisions, and so I never really told people in my family what was going on with me. I had gotten married, and my marriage lasted 9 months. So I got married in 1969, separated in 69, and then I did the Woodstock thing and the Black Panthers group. And so actually at some point, I guess, I figured, I'm not going to rehash this with my family. I didn't live with them. I lived in Connecticut, and my mother was in Washington, D.C. So, I didn't confide in them, and I didn't ask them for their advice.
When did they find out about what you went through, though?
Well, my mother was going to come visit me in Guyana. So, and, I think one of the things that we lose track of when we think about People's Temple is that there is no precedent of any other cult. That was pretty much a new word. Cult was a new word, at least in my circle in the 70s. Like, I moved into a communal group that had, political ideas that we were trying to foster. So it wasn't called a cult. We had never heard of a leader having people move in and then he would curtail their rights or limit their access to the outside or imprison them or certainly not kill them. There was nothing before People's Temple that people could use to alert us. Now when I go around and I speak at a lot of colleges and lots of different venues, and I say, there wasn't nothing before People's Temple that people could warn you off of. Now, if your child or somebody you love comes to you and said, I'm going to join this group, you say, don't forget Jim Jones. Don't forget that things can look really good and go really bad. Don't forget it. And so you can use People's Temple to educate people about how people who have a public persona that looks good, how they're really completely off the mark. So People's Temple is a very important lesson for people to know and talk to other people about. You can't sweep it away. So, but when I moved into People's Temple, there was no such thing. There was no previous, evidence or no story before then that people could warn you off of. So they didn't know I moved into a cult, and I didn't know it. I thought I moved into a commune led by a humanitarian man who was going to make a difference.
So what point did you start realizing that you may have bit off more than you can chew in regards to being a part of this?
On November 18th of 1978, that's when I realized, when it was all over.
Well, like I said, I want to hold off on that till hour number 2 because we only have you for a couple of hours here in regards to that. But at any point did you want to leave? At any point previous to the Guyana massacre, did you think about getting out and just getting your own life established? Did you feel that you had found what you were searching for, or did you just feel in a comfortable place where this was life, this is what you enjoyed?
No, I never did want to leave. I always thought that the people who were with me in People's Temple would be people that I would live my whole life with. And I thought, whether it was in San Francisco or Redwood Valley or Guyana, wherever it was, that was my adopted family. I didn't have any blood relatives there, but everybody there was an adopted member of my family, and I was part of theirs. And so my life was rich. It was enriched the way life is when you have people from all kinds of life who share things with you, share intimate experiences and thoughts. So I never wanted to leave, and I expected to live with that same group of people my whole life.
So when you were going through this re-education and this restructuring of your life, at any point did you feel that this was getting closer to God for your own spirituality, or once you realized that there wasn't much about God inside this temple or church or whatever we want to call it? I think us outsiders like to think of it as a religious sect. Did you feel that spiritually you were growing, or was that message lost?
Well, I came in as an atheist. I had been an atheist since 9th grade. So I wasn't looking for spiritual anything, but I was looking for really the practical application of Christian principles. I was looking for a lifestyle that allowed me to, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, that, you could live humbly, you could tell the truth, you could chase money changes out of wherever. I mean, I believe that I was living in a way that I was committed to living an honest life that was not based on taking somebody else's power or demonizing or demeaning anybody else. I was living a life that seemed true to me, and I was not interested in leaving it, and I wanted to just continue it. And when I say Jim Jones re-educated us, I'm talking about, like, if we were going someplace in a car, we would always integrate the front seat, even in Texas. And so when we were in Texas and integrating the front seat, we had a lot of people, chase us or, gesture at us as we drove by them or they drove by us, threatening us and things like that. And yet part of the principle of People's Temple was not backing down. So we would integrate the front seat everywhere we went. If we went to meet somebody, an elected official, or we went to promote an idea, or we went to demonstrate, or we went to do anything, we would show a solid front of all races. And so we had black and white and brown, Hispanics, we had Native American and Indians with us. We had all people from many different backgrounds were part of us, and we were proud of that. And so everywhere we went, we would integrate. And that was unlike what we were seeing, it's even unlike what we see on TV today. Even on TV today, you could watch TV for 4 hours and not see anybody of color in the United States. So, in a way, we've gone through this difficult time, and we still see racism. We see racism around us. So the problem is not fixed. And what Jim Jones was saying is, whatever you've seen before, we're changing it. We are going to always demonstrate integration. We're always going to demonstrate that our people are well fed, that our people can go to the doctor, our people can have legal services, because we had attorneys, we had social workers, we had nurses. We had all this staff to take care of the members. So, it was one of those things. We were a full-service group, whether you call it a church or a community group or whatever, we were a full service. And so that's what made it exciting, and that's what made it fun to be part of it.
We only got about 5 or 4 minutes left until we go to break. Please continue.
Mm-hmm. So, I think that always for me, I love the programs and I love the people I was working with. And I think that what happened is that because I was delighted by so many aspects of what was going on, I never watched carefully what was going on with Jim Jones. And so when I moved into People's Temple in 1970, because I wasn't religious and he was a minister, I did look at him really, I kind of put him under a microscope to see what made him tick for those 2 years. And so in those 2 years, when we were in Redwood Valley, and that was the more pristine type time of his life, because once he got to San Francisco, he was really very, he deteriorated a lot in terms of his moral standing and his psyche. He got more into drugs. And so a lot changed once he left Redwood Valley. But in the 2 years that I was watching him, I became convinced that he was really a good man and what he said was the truth. Even though that wasn't the case, but that's what I saw. And then I stopped watching. And so I think that it's important to know that, that time in Redwood Valley, he was kind of prepping all of us to let him fly once we get to San Francisco, because he was kind of out of our purview and we couldn't watch him so carefully. So I think it was kind of a setup that he knew that was an important time to get people kind of pulled in Redwood Valley. And so after he moved to San Francisco and I was still in Redwood Valley and I didn't see him 4 or 5 times a week, I just assumed that he was on the same path and, being dedicated and committed and doing all those things. It never, I just couldn't believe that he had disintegrated completely from that point.
We only got about a minute and a half here. Did he have a very centralized group of maybe his own deacons or close people near him that he could congregate with away from the commune?
He stayed with his mistresses and secretaries, and that was his innermost circle. And he never wanted anybody else to compete with him or to challenge him or share the authority or anything. And so for that reason, he really did not have an inner circle of men who might challenge his position. He was very careful to undermine, anybody around him so that there was never any ambiguity of who was the leader of the group. He was always the leader. He did not delegate anything for very long before he would, like, turn the person into kind of a scumbag and take the leadership back. So he did not have anybody at the top level, any men that he could just hang out and be comfortable with. All of his companions were women. Almost all the companions in that inner circle were women and sexual partners.
Was that odd? Or was it like a lion protecting his pride?
I don't know exactly. I mean, I didn't know at the time that he was having sex with everybody and that he had sex with everybody and that he had a mistress. So I don't know how much of that I knew. And also he did have assistant ministers who, I had lived with one of them with his family. And so he did have assistant ministers, but it wasn't really until I reflected back, I realized that he never let any other person have power for very long. Like, he never had a transition plan. If anything happens to me, this person is taking over. So I don't know if that's too different from other people who are in politics and other leaders. I don't know that everybody wants to share the throne with anybody else. So I don't know that it's that unusual.
And on that note, Laura, I'm going to get you to hold on as we're going to hop out for our first break of the night here on Spaced Out Radio. Laura Johnston Kohl is our guest tonight on the show. Her book, Jonestown Survivor, An Insider's Look. In hour number 2, we're going to get into what happened in Guyana in November of 1978. It's going to be an incredible story, probably one of the most profound hours in this show's history, coming up right after this. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. Once again, our guest, author Laura Johnston Kohl, who is a survivor of the Jonestown Massacre. We'll get more into it with her right after this on SOR.
Hey, space travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience, Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter the encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our Advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we round out December and 2017 for this show with our SOR Paranormal Roundtable. Now, I'm going to bring in some friends. We're going to light up the topics that were of the year, and I hope you come in and join us and be a part of it. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live at The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you are listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, and I got no clue what this means. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Autoxusius. I'm not sure if I'm getting that right, but that is your password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, as Bill sets password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And we're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can rock out to some Bumblefoot. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read up on the Encounter online or watch great videos from Contact TV and UFO Seekers. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, we are talking about survival. The Jonestown Massacre. Back in 1978, Jim Jones, down in Guyana in South America, had over 900 people killed in a mass suicide/murder. One of the survivors is our guest tonight, Laura Johnston Kohl. She wrote a book about this that you can find called Jonestown Survivor, An Insider's Look. This is the first time we've actually talked about this subject on the air. And I'm telling you, I am absolutely enthralled, Laura, that you are here. It is an absolute blessing to chat with you about this tonight because there is so much that you could relate to. And I know this is difficult for you because it brings back a lot of hard memories and difficult memories. And as we were talking about during the break, and I would love it for you to share with my audience, you hate talking about this subject, but you feel it's your duty to do so.
Yes. I'm a Quaker now, and in Quaker circles, we have something called readings. And when I talk about People's Temple, I go through a whole process when I'm going to do any kind of a presentation about People's Temple. So the 24 hours or so ahead of any speaking event, I'm very fragile. So not just about People's Temple, just about life. So I kind of, my husband, I've been married for 35 years. And so my husband knows the days that I'm going to be involved in, some kind of a presentation, he has to be very careful because I'm very reactive. And so then I give the speech, and then afterwards I have kind of a high because it's almost like I know how important it is for people to have the information to make good decisions. And I do feel that in many ways with People's Temple, we're still making lousy decisions. And, in both in politics and in other things going on with us, whether it's religious leaders or, military, joining the military and the leaders, or whatever is going on, we have to be accountable for what's going on around us. And so that's the lesson of People's Temple. There can never be a time that you say mindlessly, okay, well, that person is a good person. He can make a decision for me. That doesn't work. That's not real life. Nobody is going to make a decision that's in your best interest if it's against somebody else's best interest. They're not going to choose your side. And so I think that there's such an important lesson to learn about People's Temple and, like leadership or even in relationships, that you have to hold your own. And so after I talk about People's Temple and I let people know it's okay to have your own point of view, the person who's leading the group does not have your best interest in mind. He has his best interest in mind, or at least Jim Jones did. Maybe, I don't know if there's an exception. I certainly have not met an exception, but I just think it's so important. So after I kind of talk about it or relate my story, then I feel really good that I have gone through it. And sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult for me to talk about it. Often I cry. We call it PTSD, People's Temple Stress Disorder. But many times, it's very close to home. But it's so necessary that it just motivates me to speak to people. And I've had wonderful stories come back to me. People who have, I've had people come to me and say, you know what, I just left Scientology and I looked at you, I read about you, and you've inspired me to know I can make this. I can make this difficult, separation or divorce. And from other groups as well. So I feel like it is my calling. It is something that I need to do. Even though I'm one survivor of 60 and the People's Temple survivors have every point of view on every possible topic, I only speak for myself. But for myself, I know that if I had been thoughtful and using critical thinking skills, I would never have been duped so easily by Jim Jones for all those years. I know it. I just know it.
Are you mad with him? Are you still upset? Do you feel like part of your life was destroyed because of this man?
I am totally furious about many aspects. I'm certainly furious about him. I'm furious that I didn't see more. But I can't live my life based on hate and anger. I just, then he'd win. He would win. If I had my whole life now, 40 years later, still destroyed by him when he already killed 917 other people, if I let him have my power over me to make that choice, then he'd win. I'm not going to let him win. So I could be as angry as I wanted him, but he's dead. So it doesn't matter. He's gone. He has no part in my life. Now it's up to me to make a difference. And the way I'm making a difference is explaining that people who are con artists like Jim Jones, those same people are able to figure out how to push your buttons, how to get you to join, how to get you to work hard, how to get you to be dedicated. He trained, he was skilled. He was a historian. He studied Hitler. He studied other leaders along the way. He studied the ministers at Tabernacle Tent in Indiana. I mean, he was a scholar. He studied things so that when he got to have power, he could do it. He would have that learned. And so he was a brilliant student of that. And so you just have to know that there are people who spend all their waking hours figuring out how to con you. And that if you're not careful, that person is going to win. And you just can't ever give that away. You can't give yourself away like that.
So what is your opinion of religion these days? We see these mega churches going up that hold 16,000, 17,000 people. We see a lot of it, these ministries where, it looks false. It really does look wretched on the religious community. What do you think about them now? Do you think those people are just as brainwashed as you were at one time?
I really do. I know that there's some churches, like in San Francisco, there's Glide Memorial Church. And since before Jim Jones and all the way till today, it has programs for people, and there's not, whoever is in charge of Glide moves on. It could be, Cecil Williams, it could be somebody else, but the church is committed to taking care of people in the community. And so there are some exceptions out there of churches that do wonderful, wonderful work. But if you have a huge church, there's been a whole issue with, the cold spell and the homeless, and whether it was Katrina or the more recent hurricanes where there were many, many victims. and some churches not opening their doors because no one asked them to do it. That's their job. The job is to take care of the people, not to get tithing from the people so that they can live fine in their own jets. I mean, really, it's like, it's just embarrassing. It would be embarrassing to me to go to a church that holds 17,000 rich, mostly white people. It would be embarrassing to admit to anybody that I actually go there to worship the building. I mean, that's really what it turns into, worshiping a building, or the person who got you to tithe enough to build the building around him. So, I mean, because I'm an atheist, and a Quaker, we live simply, and we believe in simplicity and peace and integrity and telling the truth. And so that's where I'm happiest. And so I would be embarrassed at any kind of a church or any other kind of building that was built off the backs of the people who joined, so that it could hold 16 or 17,000 people who gather not to help people. So, I mean, even Martin Luther King said that Sunday morning in the United States was the most segregated time in our country's history, or I'm paraphrasing, but basically Sunday morning is the most segregated time in our country, and that's when people are in church. So, I mean, there are lots of issues with that.
So, what is your opinion then of, looking past, as you have had to do for almost 40 years now, when you see situations like in 1994, the Branch Davidians and David Koresh, or Heaven's Gate go along that same suicidal type route? Does it hit close to home? Does that PTSD kick in? Or do you feel that, you need to reach out to people who are involved with groups like this, say, look, you don't know what you're getting into?
Well, I mean, both things true. One thing, once you've lived in the community, like I lived in People's Temple for 9 years, and then I lived in a place called Synanon, which was a residential drug treatment program, when I came back from Guyana, and I was just like almost too traumatized to go on. I lived there for 10 years. And I think that once you live in a community, you're part of a kind of a loose-knit family of communitarians. You understand what makes the community work. It's like everybody chips in to clean the place. Everybody does the job that needs to get done. Everybody is kind to each other. And everybody, kind of works together. You collaborate, or you're mutual friends to get things done. So when you see a community, whether it's Heaven's Gate or the Branch Davidians, when you see a group of communitarians who have followed that same terrible path, there's a very different twinge or feeling in your soul that you knew them. And so it's hard to explain in a way if you've always lived in your own life with, one other person, or in a house or an apartment. But if you've lived communally and you know how communes work with this group effort, and then something like that would happen, it does hit really close to home. It hits, it's really devastating. I feel like I knew them all.
So let's go right now into right before you left for Ghana. What was the lead up to going to Guyana? What was the political pressure like in the commune at that time?
Well, we were in San Francisco, and the church was growing in San Francisco, and then one of our members overdosed on heroin, a young student who was, I think, 17. So he died of a heroin overdose. And so, in a way, that sent tremors through People's Temple, because we felt like we did everything. We had the meeting, we had places for kids to live. We got people out of prison. We did all these different things. And yet, because we lived in the middle of a city where there were drugs sold on many corners, we could not protect our very own children in that setting. So we started thinking, well, what do we do now? I mean, we're in San Francisco. Here's a kid who's a member. He grew up. He came from Indiana, lived in Redwood Valley, moved to San Francisco, and he was addicted to heroin and took an overdose. What are we going to do? And we started the conversation about moving to a place where there were no drugs available to the children. So that conversation started in about 1973 or early 74. By 1975, we decided to go ahead and start a community in Guyana. And Jim had been in Guyana in the 60s, and Guyana seemed to be a perfect place. It had a socialist government. The Forbes Burnham was the prime minister, and he was black. It had a half black, half East Indian. It was English speaking. It was tropical, and they were really anxious to have us there. One of the things that isn't brought up too often is people simple had a lot of money, and when people simple wanted to kind of buy into a place like Guyana, into a third world nation, it was able to flaunt the money, saying, okay, you know what, it's going to be mutual helpful. It's going to be win-win. We'll come into Guyana, we'll bring this money, we'll have a free medical clinic, we'll have this all set up, and you'll win, and we'll have a safe place for our community. So with all that going on, Jim approached the government of Guyana, and they said that they would lease the property of Jonestown to us. So in 1975, we had some people go down and start building roads and clearing some land. In the December of 1975, all the members of the Planning Commission, so 100 of us, went down to Guyana. We flew down over Christmas and took a look at where Jonestown was being built. I loved it from the moment I saw it. It was, as beautiful as Hawaii, as beautiful as the tropics. It was in the middle of a rainforest, certainly nothing I'd ever experienced before. And it was just exquisite. So I loved it. Some of the other people didn't like it so much, but, hey, I did love it. And we took a boat ride into Georgetown at one point, and it was a 24-hour boat ride to get from Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, out to Jonestown. And so I loved every minute of it, and one of my friends threw up the whole way, so she hated it. So, it just depends on who you talk to. But we went and visited it, and so there was just all this conversation about building our community down there. So that was at the end of 75. There were about 35 people who were living there at the beginning of 1977. So in March of 1977, 7 years after I first came to People Simple, Jim asked me if I would go down and live in Georgetown. And my job in Georgetown would be picking up people at the airport, buying all the supplies, getting replacement parts for the equipment, and doing all those different things, and shipping them into Guyana on the same boat that takes 24 hours. So I would go in and, I would fill the boat. It would go back up to Jonestown for a day, offload everything, come back down. So about every 4 or 5 days, I had to fill the boat. So that's what I did for almost a year. I did that and, cleaned fish off the dock and picked people up at the airport and went door to door to see if people had scrap metal or any kinds of things that we could use in Jonestown. So, and the longer I was there, more people joined me. So eventually there were 25 or so people living in the house in Georgetown. So I lived there for a year, and during that time, about 600 or 700 people came. For that 1 year, we had now about 700 people in Jonestown. And then in March of 1978, I moved back into Jonestown. And I lived there from March of 78 until the end of October in 1978. So it was made to be an exciting voyage. There was nothing mandatory or, it was like an opportunity to try a whole new world. So it was never thought of as, anything negative at all. It just seemed like something that was uncharted territory and that it would be exciting, and I found it exciting.
So you make your way down there. What was the reasoning why he wanted to move the entire congregation down there? Was it politically getting a little too tough up in the San Francisco area, or was it just something where he felt he would have more control?
Well, it was definitely both of those things, because during that time, in a way, when Jim Jones moved into San Francisco and he developed this political clout with the movers and shakers in San Francisco, he would get a call from the mayor, and the mayor would say, I'm having a very important press conference in 45 minutes, and there's nobody here to hear it except the press. So Jim would say, okay, I'll get it going on it, and he would send the Greyhound buses that belonged to People's Temple around and have 300 people there within an hour. So he became indispensable for the politicos in San Francisco. And so as his clout increased, he just, he took off like a rocket. Because here's this guy who's a radical preacher. He's white. He's right in the downtown San Francisco in the Fillmore district. And yet he was like supporting these local candidates, the mayor, the attorney general of California, the governor. And so he had all these connections, and he was making himself totally available to them for whatever they needed. So he just shot into the prestigious positions in San Francisco, and then they gave him a position as the chairman of the housing authority in San Francisco, which was an appointment, but it was a very important job. So all during that time, nobody could say anything bad about him because he wasn't an elected official. There wasn't a time that he needed to be vetted. A lot of what he did was behind the scenes, so people couldn't say, thank you very much, Jim Jones, for bringing 300 people of a captive audience to my presentation. So he did all these things behind the scene to get a position, and then nobody could really question him. So in the mid-1977 or early 77, New West magazine that was owned by Marshall Kilduff started saying, well, who is this guy anyway? Why is it we're just hearing about this guy now, and he has all this power already? So people were beginning to question who is the real Jim Jones? Will the real Jim Jones stand up and declare who he is? And so I think that Jim realized that all the things he'd been doing behind the scenes, a lot of things were going to be public. And one of the things that happened was that he said, okay, well, I've done all this for the mayor and for the lieutenant governor and this person and that. He tried to call in all those chits, say, call New West Magazine, tell them not to print a negative article about me. All that I do in the community, and they want to tell some negative stuff about me, tell them that you don't want them to print it. So he tried to call in all these favors he had been giving, and New West Magazine got all the calls saying, don't disparage Jim Jones. He's a wonderful man. He does wonderful things. And New West Magazine said, no, we're going to print the article. We're doing research. And then all of this came out. And so the big push to Guyana was when Jim Jones knew that New West Magazine was going to publish. So it wasn't just about the one kid who overdosed. It wasn't just about being someplace where nobody was overseeing what he was doing in his own group, because he never wanted to be challenged by the U.S. government or officials. He never wanted anybody else being able to censor him or tell him to do something differently. He never wanted that, but the media was getting involved and researching who he was. And so at that time, there was a group called Concerned Relatives that had started talking to people who went to Guyana, and they were saying that their relatives seemed to be held against their will. And 2 of Jim's secretaries left over the next, 8 or 10 months, and they went to Congress and said, watch out for Jim Jones. He has terrible plans for the people in Jonestown. And so all in all, there was all this this rallying cry to expose who Jim Jones was. And so Jim didn't tell all of us about that. He would make it sound like Jonestown is a wonderful place. But in his background, the background was that he knew he wasn't going to get a clean, it wasn't going to get a clean bill of health. They weren't going to say, oh, yeah, everything you said is true. They were going to disclose things about him he did not want disclosed, including when he was arrested in the sting operation in the bathroom in Los Angeles. Some of that, he told some people that he had been in the sting operation, and he was arrested because he was the leader of an integrated church, an interracial church, and powerful. But really, he was just arrested in a sting operation when he approached somebody for sex in the bathroom. So all forth, and so he knew it was time for him to go to Guyana and take as many followers as he could.
Do you think if he would have stayed in North America, he would have been arrested and the church would have dissipated?
I think if he had stayed in the United States, he certainly would never have stayed in the powerful position he had. I mean, people are disgraced all the time and come back around a year later and, get back to where, and somehow sweep that under the rug. So, I mean, he wouldn't be the first person who is disgraced and then climbed back up. So I don't know what would have happened, but I do think that if he had stayed in the United States, he would never have had the fame and glory he had at his peak, just before the news media started the research.
At this point, wasn't it not a red flag for people such as yourself to try and figure out, what was going on, that something isn't quite right, things aren't as smooth or as normal as they possibly could be?
All of this was behind the scenes. Jim heard about it because, he had informants or people told him that Newest Magazine had interviewed him, but that was not public for anybody else. And the concerned relatives, they were not, first of all, I was in Guyana already, so I didn't know anything about this. But even people who were living in San Francisco, unless you were in Jim's innermost circles, he was very careful what information got to which part of the congregation. So the majority of the congregation wouldn't know anything about this going on. He was very careful. There were probably 15 or 20 people in the know in the temple knowing that was going on, and the rest of the thousands would not know that was going on.
So you got to Guyana, and you say it's beautiful down there. It's very beautiful, picturesque, a gorgeous, gorgeous area around there. When did you start realizing that maybe living down there wasn't the issue? Was it when Congressman Leo Ryan had arrived to check on people, or was it before that?
It was actually after that, because I lived in Georgetown for the year. I moved to Jonestown and worked on agricultural crews and taught Spanish at night and did counseling and things like that. And then at the end of October, Jim had me go back into Georgetown. While we were in Georgetown, Congressman Ryan came to the house in Georgetown and crossed over the back fence. We had a cinder block fence in the back of the house. So he came over the fence and came through the house and shook everybody's hands and introduced himself and said, I'm Leo and I'm the congressman from San Mateo. A lot of the people in People's Temple were my constituents before they came here. I just came to check on everything. And so, we assured him everything was great because, of course, Jim had set up the house with people who were all positive. He's not going to have people in Georgetown who don't want to be there.
So when you heard, or where were you when the murder of Congressman Ryan took place?
On November 18th, I was in the house. About 58 of us were living in the house at that time. The basketball crew from Jonestown had come into town. to have a competition with a Guyanese team. And so when I came to the house, I had the only car for the household. So when I came to the house, the person who was Jim's secretary told me that I needed to go across town and pick up Stephen and Jimmy Jones. Those are two of Jim's sons. Another one of his sons was in Jonestown. Lou Jones was in Jonestown. But Stephen and Jimmy were part of the basketball team. So Sharon sent me across town to get Jimmy and Stephen and a few others, and I brought them back to the house. And then Sharon and Stephen and Jimmy and a few other people had a meeting upstairs at the back of the house. And so while they were having their meeting, the rest of us just went around and did our business. And then we went out that night. I went to a political talent show, and other people went to, churches and all these different things. We had jobs day and night. We were busy all the time. So we all went out, and when we came back, the Guyanese Defense Force had taken over the house. And so they had us all sit in the living room. So we just sat down on the floor, around the walls in the living room. And while we were there, they were asking us questions, and then they brought out the 4 body bags, because it turned out that when Leo Ryan had gotten to Jonestown, he had gone, he had liked Jonestown a lot. He had told everybody he could tell that we had worked hard and that many people loved it. And when he stepped and walked through the community, people handed him notes saying they wanted to leave with him. So he was spending the night at Jonestown. The next day, he took 12 or 15 people with him to the airplanes, and then Jim sent a truckload of people with guns after him to be sure they killed Congressman Ryan and anybody else who got in the way, but for sure to kill Congressman Ryan. So Jim set the whole thing in motion. And then he called everybody in Jonestown to come in and sit in the pavilion in Jonestown, and he proceeded to tell them that they had conspired with him to kill a congressman, and there was no going back. There was no way to fix what had happened. The congressman was dead. Mm-hmm. They had donated all their housing and money to him. They couldn't go back to the United States. They'd be held accountable. They'd be put in jail or have court. Their kids would be put in foster care, and we knew about foster care in San Francisco. Nobody would want their child in there. And so he just coerced people hour after hour, telling them that there was no solution, there was no way to go back. And as he was coercing them to drink the poison that he had made up, that his secretaries and mistresses had, he had called the Georgetown house and told Sharon Amos that all of us should kill ourselves in Georgetown as revolutionary suicide, because everybody was dying in Jonestown. So Sharon had met with Stephen and Jimmy. Stephen wanted to go into Georgetown to stop it all, but there was no way for him to go to Jonestown. It was just too far away, and it would have been too late. But he just said, we're not doing it. It's all over now. We are not killing ourselves, and we're not even telling people in the house about it. We're not doing it. So Stephen himself and Jim's son, stopped anybody in the house from even knowing about it. And in the meantime, people in Jonestown were drinking the poison and dying. And then finally Jim was shot, and his nurse was shot also. So everybody in Jonestown died, other than just a handful of people. And the people in Georgetown were just finding out about it when the police came and took over the house and said they were protecting us against ourselves.
So you were in Georgetown when this happened, and that's how you were able to survive.
That's right. So I was in Georgetown, and when Sharon Amos talked to Stephen and Jimmy, and they said, no, we're not doing it, the rest of the house didn't know anything about it. We went about our business, and when we came back, Sharon had killed herself and her 3 children. And that's when the police were called, because she had killed herself and the kids in the house. And that's the very first notice that any of us got that anything had happened.
Did you know that there were armed guards around Guyana for Jim?
You mean around Jonestown?
Yes.
They were armed guards, but, the armed guards were people, I had raised them, I had tutored them, I had counseled their families. The guns they had were old pieces of crap. I mean, it was not, if you think about somebody with, MiGs or some fancy guns, we're talking about people that I know, somebody's brother, somebody's mother, somebody, I had known as a 12-year-old who was then 19. So they were not people who were threatening. That they had guns seemed almost more ridiculous. The issue at the end was not the guns. The issue at the end was Jim's brainwashing. The way Jim handled it by saying that you couldn't leave, there was no way to go back, you had no money, all that going on. And then as the people were being coerced into, finally giving into their exhaustion and him saying they couldn't go back, then he had the secretaries and mistresses walk around the pavilion to where all the kids were sitting, and they gave the kids the poison. So the adults who were sitting in the pavilion saw that it was too late to do anything. Their children were dying already. Jim pulled out all the stops, and once a parent sat 10 feet away from their own child and knew there was no way to save their child, then the adults really had no will to keep going. There was no way to see how you could survive when your very own children had died, within a few feet of you. So Jim just created that. He just created a scenario that really people weren't able to get out of.
So it was calculated. It almost seemed like it was a long-term plan that had been sitting there in a just-in-case type moment. To kill the children first, that would obviously lead to the parents committing suicide, because I don't know how I would react if my 4-year-old son had to, drink cyanide mixed with Kool-Aid. I would flip out. I don't know how I would react.
Nothing, I think I said earlier, there was nothing spontaneous ever in anything that happened in People's Temple. There was nothing spontaneous. Everything was planned. When we're talking about the cyanide was in Jonestown for 6 months to a year before all this happened. So we know that. We don't really know about the planning of the final moments because, some of the survivors have talked to me about it. Some people think, they had a plan in place for a week in advance to kind of delegate who was going to do what, who was going to mix the poison, all that. Also, the doctor who was in Jonestown did experiment with the poison in pigs to see how much poison it took to kill one of the pigs or the livestock. So there was some planning going on, but in a very tiny group. I personally think Jim picked the people who were the most, dysfunctional, including the lawyer, the doctor, and a few other people who were just really, not mentally intact. People who were mentally ill, who really bought Jim's message totally. He had that group of people do some of the planning with the poison, and that same small group kind of came up with things. And then at the end, he had delegated the jobs to the secretaries and mistresses, but that might have happened even that night after Ryan started getting the notes. Nobody really knows that. If the exact details of who's going to give the poison to which group or something. So I don't really know how those details were worked out. If it was a one night or a week or a month, I don't know. But certainly every detail was scripted. Certainly there was no chance that any detail would be lost.
How does it affect you today when you hear people say the slang term, drink the Kool-Aid?
many of the survivors and I all really work hard to try and educate people not to be flippant when you say that really powerful term. It's all in our vernacular lately. I mean, I can watch TV. I've watched TV some days and I've heard it 4 times from everybody, from political leaders to, programs, to news media, to interview people who are interviewed. I mean, it is like throughout our society, people are using the expression, and many times in ways that don't make sense, many times in ways that are really phony or, don't have the depth of understanding of what it's all about. So a lot of us used to get mad about it before. I guess I've kind of given up. And so instead, when I'm talking about people's temple, I explain that that's a really hurtful phrase for anybody who had anything to do with People's Temple. And in California, I mean, in the Bay Area, I go up to the Bay Area Book Festival once a year, and almost everybody I meet knew somebody from, their work or their neighborhood or their school. Almost everybody had somebody who died in Jonestown. So it's a very big group of people who really, it breaks their hearts to hear it, mine included. I mean, I just think people don't get it, that you can't say something so hurtful so flippantly.
But a lot of people are naive and not in the know.
That's right.
And I'm not saying that as an excuse. It's a lame excuse. But a lot of people they don't know. I mean, it's 40 years past the event, and, the ignorance has overtaken the message.
Except, I mean, in a way, that gets back to our conversation earlier when you said, why do I go out? Because 40 years shouldn't make the message go away. The message of Hitler shouldn't go away, and that's, from the 40s. So, I mean, there are certain messages that you shouldn't have to be a historian to not understand our historic past. And saying the whole expression about don't drink the poison or don't drink the Kool-Aid, people will be better off if they understand where that came from.
So let's go back to Guyana. The incident happens. 900 of your closest friends are now dead. How did you find out about this massacre? Did you believe it was actually happening when the message over the phone came?
So when the message came over the phone, we didn't know that. The people in the house only knew that it had happened when the Guyanese Defense Force took over our house. They came and they took out the body bags of Sharon Amos and her kids. And then after that, they started talking about what was going on in Jonestown. And then somebody said, well, there were 300 bodies found in Jonestown. So a bunch of us got together and tried to figure out, okay, who could have run into the bush? We tried to figure out who had survived. And then we got another report, no, 600 people. There's 600 bodies there because some of the bodies are on top of other bodies. And so then we tried to figure out, okay, well, if 600 people died, which 300 people do we think ran off? And we were optimistic until the very bitter end, till we realized nobody survived. And it turned out, that 11 people left on a picnic the morning of the 18th. 2 young men ran into the bush. 2 seniors survived it in their way, and Jim had sent 3 other people out with suitcases of money. And so those were the only ones who survived. Everybody else in Jonestown died.
Did you see
and
any
so we found out.
Go ahead.
So we found out, over the next few days, Guyana put a news blackout because their government was compromised. It happened in Guyana with somebody that their government had allowed to get established there. And so, I mean, they were responsible for some aspect of it or for not seeing it or not monitoring it somehow. So they just shut down their news media and had a news blackout for 3 days until they figured out what their government position was. And so by that time, all of us in the house were calling home. I was calling my mother and my father and finding out. And so in the United States, the world press started talking about it. But we had to call home and call back to the United States to find an update. And then so over the next few days, we would get updated on information on who died, who seemed to get out, and all that information. But it was, we had to investigate it ourselves in a way. But by the end of the first week, we realized that everybody in Jonestown was dead.
How did you react when you first heard the horrendous tape, and I don't know how else to put that, but the horrendous tape of Jim announcing over speakers, what is happening, that we are doing this, or the reason why we're doing this, telling people who were having their bodies spasm and retching in pain to basically shut up and take it like a dignified human being. Did you ever hear that tape, or did you stay right away from it?
When I came back, I moved into San Francisco into the old People's Temple building. So I lived there for about 4 months until the executor of the whole People's Temple estate moved us out. And every day there was bad news from some front or other. Every day there was a distraught relative on television, and every day the newspaper had another article, disclosing something else about Jim Jones. And so finally I just had to shut down and not listen anymore. And when the tape came out, I think that it was made public. I believe it wasn't made public until after the 1979 started. I just could never listen to it. And what I did from really day one is everything that ever came across or got my attention, I would put it in an old trunk I had that I had brought back from Jonestown, my Jonestown trunk. And I would put any magazine articles, any letters, any notes, any CDs, anything at all that was related to People's Temple. I just stored it in a trunk, knowing that maybe someday in my life I'd be able to go back and look at it, but I certainly couldn't look at it then. Mm-hmm. So, I stored it, and I just kind of protected myself as much as I could, but it was pretty impossible living in San Francisco. And then right after that, the mayor and so Moscone and Harvey Milk were murdered within 10 days of that. So San Francisco was just at the bleakest, most depressing, and most really devastated period at that time anyway. So there was just so much going on. There was all bad news in San Francisco.
How did Jim Jones die?
It turns out that he was in his cottage down kind of off the beaten track in Jonestown, and the rest of the people in the cottage had died of, I believe, of gunshots, but I'm not sure actually about how other people died, but he died of a gunshot, and his primary nurse died of a gunshot. And it appears, although there's some discussion because there are no witnesses, but it appears that she likely shot him and then shot herself. But we don't know for sure what order things were done. But he did not shoot himself, and he did not drink the poison, but he was shot to death.
How long did it take you to get over the emotional reaction of learning this devastation and complete loss of life? Or are you even over it now?
Well, I'm definitely not over it. And, I don't want to be over it. Like, I would say I'm not over it, but I'm not consumed by it. But I'm not over it. Like, I've gone ahead and had a life of my own. I've been married 35 years. I have a wonderful son who was born in 1989, who's a high school history teacher. I've been a teacher myself for 25 years. I'm teaching 6th grade now. I've written a book. I have wonderful friends and colleagues, and I'm an activist and very involved in politics in the United States today, and civil rights and human rights and immigrant rights. So I have a really full, rich life, but I'm not over what happened in Jonestown. And my survival from that whole event, in a way, I'm completely different. And every day that I live, I'm impacted by it. Like I'm not a flighty person, so I'm not over it.
Would you consider yourself a follower? Sheeple, as the popular term is today?
Absolutely not today. But I don't really quite understand what happened to me in People's Temple. Because really, before People's Temple, I wasn't a follower. And the day People's Temple ended, I wasn't a follower. But I don't know what the hell happened to me while I was there, that all of a sudden I think that I was just enchanted by the freedom to be, like, I don't know, learn competency on so many different levels. I think that it just, or, to have somebody who seemed to be so purely dedicated to the same issues I was determined to do. I don't know, I just felt empowered in that setting, and I didn't have to argue or disagree with things. I liked the way things were going for the most part. And things that I didn't like, I figured were the minor things that could be fixed once we, had the community together, or once we had Jonestown built, or the other things. I mean, I had endless hope that things would work out well, because the major things, which were all of us living together in harmony, that was done. So, there's no community without problems. I just thought that the problems were all fixable. There had never been a chance that I'd think we were going to die, because that had never happened to any community before.
Right.
I had no sense that was going to happen.
Laura Johnston Kohl, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It's an absolute pleasure and the honor to chat with you in regards to this, for educating our audience. I hope one day we get to do it again.
That would be great. And I do want to mention, I do love questions. And so if people have questions, they can look at my Facebook page for Jonestown Survivor. I answer all of them personally. I really do love your questions or input or thoughts. So I hope you look me up on Jonestown Survivor and send me a note.
Love it. Thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Where can people find Jonestown Survivor and Insider's Look?
You can get it off of Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. So I have ebooks. I also have an audio book through audio.com, and you can find out more information on my website. So I have it on audio, print, and hardback, and softback, and the Nook and Kindle. So
wonderful.
It's available in all the different medias.
Thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. We'll be back with hour number 3. Joe Roop from Spaced Out Saturdays will be joining me right after this.
Thanks so much.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on SpacedOutRadio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you're seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at SpacedOutRadio.com.
We're lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries, so tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Shout out to Cousin Gary listening in Edmonton tonight, where I'm sure it's probably around minus 40 degrees Celsius, which would be 40 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold out there. Thanks for listening in, Cousin Gary. Appreciate you tuning on in as well as everybody else. Now, tomorrow night on the program, we have the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. It is the final roundtable of the year. We're going to look at some of the hot topics of 2017, debate them, see where things went, how things changed, what is up. It's going to be an entertaining 3 hours tomorrow night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us. We're also live on The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. This one's just absolutely intimidating. Autexusius. I think that's it. Autexusius. Yeah, that seems right. We'll just go with that. Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. That's where we store our archives. And our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can hit up our GoFundMe account, going to gofundme.com/We Own the Night. We are trying to build a brand new studio here, and we need your help. So we're hoping that you can help us out with that. I know it's difficult with Christmas just ending a couple of days ago, and you haven't got the credit card bills yet, but we would appreciate it. You can also read up on the Encounter online, rock out to some Bumblefoot, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers and Contact TV, and so much more at spacedoutradio.com. We want to thank Laura Johnston Kohl for the first 2 hours of the show tonight, telling us about what it was like to survive the Jonestown Massacre. Yes, what an evil, evil story that was. And now we bring in, from Spaced Out Saturdays, Joseph Roop. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Not a problem, my friend. Not a problem. I am just absolutely blown away that anybody in this day and age, or even going back 40 years, which will be next year, could fall for the brainwashing of that type of cult. Like, I just don't get it. Maybe I'm naive to the fact. Maybe these people didn't even know it was happening. I mean, Laura was saying she didn't know it was happening at all. But in today's day and age, we call these people snowflakes, we call them sheeple, we call them a number of different adjectives if they don't support what we support. What's your opinion on the whole brainwashing aspect?
Well, it's a long process. Nobody joins a religion or a cult or any group because they feel uncomfortable. Anytime you start in these things, it's awful. It's really comfortable. You could take a look at Scientology or I mean, any religion, usually it's somebody that's hurting or broke down for some reason, and they're welcomed in, and you don't really find out about the true agenda until you're so deep into this thing. So it's always a bait and switch when it comes to cults. I can totally understand how people fall for it, actually.
It's just difficult. I mean, I don't think I could kill myself on on somebody's word. But I mean, if I had, like we were talking about, I mean, Jim Jones had planned it out so professionally, if we can use that term, without sounding too demeaning. I mean, to make these young kids, the parents feed the children, and people watching their children die from cyanide poisoning right in front of them. I mean, the emotional breakdown that would take. I mean, you can't blame these parents for cracking when you see 1, 2, 3 of your children lying dead on the ground. You've just killed your children. What's the point of going on?
Yeah. Well, once you get to that point, it's game over. But that's how you get sucked into these things. Nobody started out, I promise you, that joined that cult and knew that was going to happen from the start. Once you're deep enough into it, it's too late almost. I don't know. I've never been that far into anything, to be honest with you.
No, neither have I. But yet it has continued. I mean, thankfully it doesn't happen very often. But I mean, you think that people with the Branch Davidians would have learned? You think that the people from Heaven's Gate would have learned? But it really shows how, if you get the right person, they can manipulate your mind to doing what you would never do if you were, I hate to use this term, but sane.
Yeah, I mean,
clearly thinking.
Yeah, but see and I get what you're saying, Dave. The whole thing is like, from the jump, you're clear-minded from the jump. So it's a slow and gradual process of manipulation, and it doesn't just happen in religions and stuff like that. It happens all over. There's cults everywhere, cult mind, everywhere, and it scares me. I talk about it a lot too, and it really does scare me. Once you stop thinking for yourself, it's all over. When you start caring about how comfortable you are or how much people like you more than you do more than you trust your own thought and gut instinct, you've got a problem from the jump.
No, and Gail brings up a good point here in the SOR Space Travelers group. She is saying, didn't he have armed men surrounding the people, so if they didn't drink, they would be shot? Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. He did. I mean, what do? Do you maybe hope to survive a bullet in case the bullet missed? Do you run into the forests? What surprises me, and I guess, I mean, there couldn't have been that many armed men, because they didn't have that many weapons, even though their weapons, which they did have, were antiquated, according to Laura. Now, I'm thinking, why didn't any of these people who didn't want to die or kill their own children through cyanide poisoning, why didn't they rush these gunmen? Why didn't they, take a stand? That's what I don't understand.
I really think they were psychologically manipulated, man. Like, I'm sure some of them were afraid and didn't want to do it, but they were so deep into this thing. It's like, it's a way of life too. At the same time. So think of somebody challenging your whole way of life at the last minute after they've been telling you one thing the whole time. Surrounding you with guns is another thing, though. That's a fight or flight thing. I don't think anybody knows what they would do. I would like to think that I would try to fight my way out of that situation.
But we don't know how deep that brainwashing went. I mean, if these people were willing to, give up their house, their home, their jobs, their 401ks, their inheritances to Jim Jones, they're obviously willing to put their lives on the line for this whack job, and thank goodness he is dead, so he can't harm any more people. But the whole point is, if they're willing to give up everything, life is basically useless. It reminds me a lot of what we see in the Middle East, where, these suicide bombers run into crowds and blow themselves up. It's not about their own personal life, it's about the cause.
Yeah, and they're totally convinced that there's this great thing after life, which there may be, but that's what a lot of religions and cults are all about. It's like, just get through this world and hurry up to death so you can get your reward. There are so many ideologies like that, and honestly, I think it's the evilest trick on the planet, because I think life is the greatest thing in the universe.
Well, I think so too. I mean, I much prefer living than, the eventual option that we'll all end up having. That just seems like it would suck. But the whole point that I'm getting at here is how do you, I just don't understand how people get sucked into this. I really don't. I realize of people being passionate about something, okay? A lot of people will call the paranormal community that we deal with a very passionate group. I wouldn't say it's cult-like, but
it can be.
But you look at it, I think every one of us who is involved in this field at one time or another has lost family or friends because of the topics we discuss on a daily basis.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
So I mean, the loss is there on a much, lighter scale. But I just could not fathom being around that type of scenario and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid or Flavor Aid or whatever you want to do it." I think I cherish life a little bit more than, going in some mass suicide attempt. I mean, we're not talking about people here, Joe, who have a choice. All right. I mean, I think of all these really, really destitute people who were jumping off the Twin Towers during 9/11. They didn't have a choice. They wanted to go out on their own terms, and by God, maybe a miracle would happen that they would survive somehow the fall. But
I think one woman actually did survive. It was crazy.
That I don't know.
But yeah, I see your point.
I mean, if it came down to something like that, I mean, I don't know what decision I would make. And I pray to God that I never have to be put in that situation. And thankfully, in my first 44 years of life, I haven't had to do that. However, it's still scary to think that, someone could have that much control based on religion or cult practices to make you feel that your life is absolutely worthless. It's all about the cause.
Man, it's I totally agree, and it's happening all over the planet right now. I don't want to get into religion and stuff, but we all know that there's plenty of ideas out there where people are willing to kill themselves and everyone else for some highly unlikely possibility in a different dimension, which, if they believe it, they believe it. But a lot of people, the human psyche is, we think we have so much control over our own minds, and we don't really understand the subconscious good enough. I don't think. I mean, if any of you guys have ever taken psychology, I think I took basic psychology, you start to understand the power of the subconscious and how it can be slowly programmed over a long period of time, and how a person can be manipulated. The CIA understands this real well, and I would say some dark forces do, like certain black magicians and stuff. They understand it. They understand how to program people's subconscious. And yeah, when I look at the world, sometimes I always think, oh, this big good and evil plan, this big battle between good and evil, that's all hogwash. It's all about consciousness. You're either awake or you're asleep. But when you look at a story like Jonestown, it really does make you take a step back and go, no, man, there's some real horrid evil on this planet, you know.
Trip is asking in the chat room, Laura said she was in Georgetown when the suicide happened, right? Yes. And that Jim Jones had called the house where 58 members of the house were living and told, including 2 of his sons, and said that everybody in that house should kill themselves as well because that's what was happening in Jonestown, and they refused to do that. So that's how she survived.
Oh, good for them.
I
don't know that, man. It's hard to think about being in that situation, but we live awful comfortable lives, you know. And then you think about that. That could have been. I really believe, man, that could have been any one of us if we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know.
Well, and it could happen so easily. It could happen so easily. I mean, take people who, you know, on a much lesser scale, you know, take mothers or fathers who are going through a bitter divorce and they start using the children as pawns. And all of a sudden, the children start getting into this whole game on who to believe, who not to believe.
Oh, man.
You know, I mean, I know personally, I went through a very bitter divorce. And one of the things my ex-wife told the children was basically at a young age, because I do have a stepdaughter from my previous marriage whom I have barely any contact. I saw my former stepdaughter on Christmas for the first time in years. And I can tell you this from point blank. My ex-wife had stated to my children at that time, I need to know everything that happens at Dad's house. But when it comes to my house, if Daddy asks, you don't tell him anything. And because the children love their mom, believe their mom, they don't really understand what is going on, they were brainwashed by that.
That's right.
So I had to
exactly
watch.
Right.
I had to watch every single word that I said because I had to figure that out on my own. Until my daughter one day, my youngest daughter, told me about that. Because she was so upset about something, she couldn't hold it in, and she was so afraid of getting in trouble. Because she wasn't allowed to tell me what happened at Mommy's house.
Dude, I wish I could tell you. I mean, I'll have to maybe one day tell you off air, but I've gone and am going through that exact same thing right now. I don't want to tell you because I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble. And I'm like, dude, son, you got to tell me, you know? It's personal, but you're right. Kids they become aware and become victims, I guess, to brainwashing from an early age if they're caught in that situation. But what you hope is, what you try to do, Dave, and what I try to do is teach them about how manipulation works so they can watch out for it, you know.
Absolutely. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. You can't move forward with anything else. You need to be able, Joe, to figure that out, and you have to try and play by the rules, whether it's a cult situation or whether it's a divorce situation. It's terrible, but that's the way it goes. You know, I mean, I think the fact, you know, that when you look at the entire situation of these cults, whether it's Jonestown, whether it's the Branch Davidians, whether it's, you know, Heaven's Gate, we have people who are willing to give their lives. Maybe they're yearning for something. I'm wondering if there has ever been, and I haven't looked this up, but I'm wondering if there is any sort of you know, maybe they come from bad homes, or maybe they, you know, what the statistics of people who are in these groups are. Are they educated people who just snap and realize that life is too tough and just want freedom? There has to be something that drives people to these types of groups. What do you think it is?
I think you're spot on. I mean, I've seen some Jonestown documentaries, and the survivors that talked about it, a lot of those people were broken. You know, I wouldn't say necessarily weak-minded, but broken enough to when they met a congregation that welcomed them with open arms. And this Jim guy even told him, he said, "Hey, if you want me to be, you want me to be your brother, I'll be your brother. You want me to be your father, I'll be your father. If you want me to be your God, I'll be your God." So, and he said this, that's his quote. Now imagine you going from just a cruddy life to a congregation of people that are just all loving and they accept you for who you are. And it's like a whole new life. And no one can convince you any different. Your friends could come along and say, "Hey man, you joined a cult. You need to watch out." And you're just like, "No, that's not what's happening. You're just jealous. I'm happy now." And that's how the manipulation starts to work. But yeah, you're right. A lot of those people were that way. Some of them were addicts. Some of them were abused. Some of them just had really bad self-esteem. I mean, they admitted it in a few of the documentaries.
Well, I mean, you look at Charles Manson's group as well. I mean, if that isn't manipulation 101, I don't know what is. I mean, it's definitely a sickness between people like Charlie Manson, Jim Jones, even David Koresh, or Marshall Applewhite. I mean, it's just, there is a sickness there. And, a lot of people, and this is where I think we need to draw the line, a lot of people will then start attacking mainstream religion, whether it's Christianity, Catholicism, baptism, Buddhism, Muslim, whatever it is, Hinduism. I think a lot of people will start attacking those, saying that that's part of the brainwashing element as well. I'm not so sure that you can combine the two,
Well, I don't know if I told Buddhism maybe, but and look, not everybody that's a Christian is. There's so many different denominations and so many different types of people, but when a cult becomes dangerous, whether it's a religion or whatever it is, when you are killing people in the name of what you believe, now I'm still going to put you on that other side of the line. Now, I'm not saying they're all that way, but we can obviously see that that's what's happening here all over the world. It doesn't really happen in the West that much, but it does happen sometimes. I mean, we've lost our own countrymen because of it.
Oh, very much true. Very much true. Okay, I mean, you look at it. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's Muslim population or Christian extremists. I mean, look at the Westboro Baptist Church. Okay, I mean, them sons of bitches. I mean, if there isn't
crazy,
if there isn't Christian hypocrisy at its best, I don't know what is. I mean, it's horrific the way they treat people. All right. I mean, but it goes far. There's always people who are willing to go to the extreme, whether you believe it or not. These people who shoot up or bomb abortion clinics, okay, they don't have their head screwed on right. Okay, you don't harm people in order to get closer to God. Even their Bible or the Quran says that. It's insane. It's insane.
That's my point, though. We get look. I was brought up a Baptist when I was young, and we kind of moved around churches and stuff. And when you're a kid, a lot of kids don't have a choice. This is what you're going to be. This is what you're going to learn. This is what you're going to believe. And a lot of kids are even told, when we all die and go to heaven, everything's going to be okay. Kids don't want to die, man. They don't want to think about that stuff.
True enough. My mom grew up in a very strict religion of the Mennonite faith. And we still have relatives in that faith. And, they're great people, the best cooks you'll ever meet. And some of the most beautiful human beings, that I've ever met in my life. And, but they're strict. They don't vote. They do not believe in education after grade 8 or 9. They do not believe in television. They do not believe in radio. You know, wow. I mean, it is strict. They are, I wouldn't call them a cult, I would call them a strict religion. But that being said, I do know that if I was starving, I could go over to my aunt and uncle's house right now, and they would probably fill up my entire freezer and fridge full of food and my cupboards.
Right.
You know, that's just the way they are. They're extremely giving people. You know, so I think there has to be a strong balance in understanding the difference between being, you know, strict and you know, following your religion comparatively to, you know, going haywire and bombing abortion clinics or you know, running through the streets with a bomb tied to your waist, yelling jihad and pressing the button. I think there's a little bit of, you know, difference between the two.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't, see, and that's kind of my point. You can't narrow it down to a religion, really. But a lot of these cult leaders use religion to get people in the door. So what needs to happen more, I mean, I'm not trying to be a pragmatist here because I am a spiritual person, but what needs to happen more is people need to understand psychology from an early age. They need to understand when they're being manipulated. I see people being manipulated now as we speak with all this stuff in the media, the UFO stuff, the everything. You know, it's all about drawing a line in the sand, and, you know, you're pressured to pick a side. And then once you're there, you've got to stay there. You don't want to go against the grain. You don't want to be the one person that stands up against everybody, especially when they're the ones that have been helping you and agreed with you and been your pals forever. See, that's how a cult works. Then you're just kind of stuck.
Well, I think the first rule of thumb should be if they are asking you to sell absolutely everything and donate every dollar that you have in your piggy bank towards the church or the commune or whatever, that has to be rule number one. You just don't go. You just don't go. You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, right now there's a cult all over the world. I know they're in Canada, the United States, you know, Australia. They have these yellow deli, you know, markets or restaurants that the food is incredible. But if you get talking to them, they'll try and indoctrinate you into their cult.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What do they believe? What are they telling people?
Oh, very strict. Very strict. You know, the head of the church can have multiple wives. You must sell everything to come work on the farm. You work 16 hours a day, 7 days or 6 days a week, except on Sundays, which is meant for the church. It's incredible. You live a vegan lifestyle.
And they're all over the world right now?
They are all over the world. I'm going to see if I can bring that up.
Well, there you go, because there's cults everywhere, man.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see here.
I got some people mad at me the other day because I told people to watch out for being in the Tom DeLonge cult, you know. And I didn't mean it like there's a Tom DeLonge cult, but it sure seems like since that news came out, some people aren't allowed to think for themselves about this thing, you know.
They're called the 12 Tribes. It's
never heard of them.
Yes, the 12 Tribes.
I'll be on the lookout for them, I can tell you that.
Oh, absolutely.
Cults scare me, man. They just scare me, Dave.
But I can tell you this. If you ever go to their restaurant, order the chili. It is fantastic. Their sandwiches are fantastic, too. So I can honestly say, pardon me, they aren't vegan. I do apologize because I did have a ham and Swiss sandwich there with my soup or my chili one day. It was very good.
What's it called? The Yellow Deli? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Yellow Deli people. All you got to do is Google Yellow Deli people. And they have these yellow delis spread all around the world. And,
how they get you with the food.
Well, here's somebody who was in this. They say, if you join, you give up all possessions. It's a big step, but everybody there has done the same thing. They are such a community in the true sense of a word. It's like a real family. Everyone works for the benefit of the whole group.
Okay. Are they killing people?
Not yet.
Well, then that's a good cult then. I mean, I'm not going to join a cult, and I don't mind cults, but as long as you're not killing people in the name of your cause, you're okay in my book.
Well, there are groups in New York, Vermont, Tennessee, Colorado, and Florida in the United States. So, you know, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting.
Wow. Well, that, you know, that would be... Some people would even call, I can hear that, what's his name, Red, off that 70s show, calling them communist, you know. Communist. It's not a bad idea, man. I've even seen neighborhoods, you know, I'm not trying to tell you guys to go out and join this thing, but I've seen neighborhood they get together and they make their own garden in their own community. They don't have to go to the store that much. They help each other out, you know. Some people call that socialism or nationalism.
Oh my God!
Or whatever,
Socialism! Don't bring up the S word around here. Don't bring up the S word.
My bad. I did something else wrong at SOR.
Oh my God!
That's the second word I can't say.
You're going to get the Republicans crying foul and loading their guns as we speak. It's amazing.
Well, I think the difference in what they believe is when you're forced to do something like that versus a choice. You know.
Did I ever tell you I got into an argument with Joey Giggles? Remember Joey Giggles? Our listeners will know who he is.
He's a real snarky dude?
No. He's a good guy. Good guy. And he's very Republican, very pro-Trump, and not that matters. But during the election, he kept on saying, you know, socialism is bad. Socialism's going to kill this country. Socialism is horrible. It's communism. So I said to him one day, I said, well, you know, Canada is a socialist country. We always have been. No, I don't believe that. I said, okay, well, let's take this to a whole new realm, Joe. I said, you can't work. You're on disability. He goes, yeah. I said, well, disability is a socialism program that the United States adopted. I said, give back your check. Well, I can't do that. I said, well, no, you don't like socialism, so give back your check. If you're that offended by it, you're living off a socialist program. So give back your check. Well, how do I live? I said, I don't know, but right now you're a socialist.
No, you need to become a rugged individual and figure it out.
Oh, it was absolutely hilarious. So every time during the election that he went on this socialism rant, I was kind of trolling his Facebook. And every time he went on the socialism rant, I kind of went off on him and said, well, are you going to give back your disability check? Because disability is a socialist program.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you got to watch out, man. Talking politics on the radio is rough.
I know.
You could lose half your audience in about 3 seconds.
I know. We're not getting into that. Sailor Twift.
I get it.
This is your economy on capitalism, a full produce section. This is your economy on socialism. Venezuela. Empty shelves. Last time I checked, I went to the grocery store yesterday, and it was full. It was full.
Don't you guys get like free health care? Do y'all get free health care?
Well, I mean, you pay for it in taxes. But, I mean, I went to the doctor's office today, saw my doctor, no bill. I love it.
Nice.
Love it. You know? Love it.
I can't get my prescriptions right now because my insurance doesn't want to cover them anymore for some reason. So, whatever.
That sucks. Let's get off the politics stuff, man, because I could start to rant. You know, where's the aliens when you need them? Where is the aliens when you need them? You know,
I don't think they're going to show up anytime soon, Dave.
No, I don't think so either. I got a question for you. You know, because I was in this debate. One of the people I've been trolling on Facebook recently, and it's somebody whom I have the utmost respect for, who is Grant Cameron.
Oh, yeah?
And Grant has every day been posting about what he is learning about disclosure. And, one of the things that he talks about Hold on a second. Question coming in from Sailor Twift at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Why do Canadian tourists here tell me that your healthcare runs out of money before the end of the year? They say only life and death cases are taken after that. No, not true. Not true at all. Healthcare is 24/7, 365, even 366 on a leap year. So, no, that isn't true.
They're trying to suck you back in, Dave.
No, I'm finished with that. But, I was reading, and Grant Cameron today had a post about Luis Elizondo. And I'm just trying to pull it up here as I,
He just posted something else on YouTube today, too, I believe, about the medals and stuff.
He posts every day. He posts literally every day.
He's into it, man.
Well, I mean, this is his life.
Work.
This is his life's work, right? So, I mean, he should be. He should absolutely be. I'm just trying to find the feed where I was commenting today about it. Let's see here. Where is it? I need the Jeopardy theme song right now. Anyways,
Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program.
Okay. The gist of it was he was talking about security clearance and Luis Elizondo. How come we have not heard, Joe, Luis Elizondo, who's said to run the UFO program that was funded, the $22 million between 2007 and 2012, until it was apparently shut down. If Luis Elizondo just left his job a couple days before joining the To the Stars Academy, and he already has a replacement, and he's already been replaced there, and he still has top secret clearance, which he may for another couple years, depending on the contract that he signed. But if the program ended on 2012, what's Luis Elizondo been doing for 5 years if he says that he's been working on advanced aerial threats?
That's a good question. That's a real good question. I don't think anybody's answered that one yet, have they? Does Grant have an answer for it?
I want to know the answer. I'm waiting to find the answer on that, because I think it's a logical question. Because it would sure as hell show that the program really didn't end. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and these guys, they get these government funds and stuff, and they pretty much live off of them. We all know that. I guess till they run out of money. But, I mean, if he says he left in 2012, then... yeah, it don't add up to me either. A lot of this stuff don't add up to me.
That's what, they may sound like basic questions. Like, I know everybody's sick of me talking about the media. I know everybody is sick about, saying how they're, really, for a long time there, they were really not taking any interview requests or anything along those lines. And I, pretty much ad nauseum bitched and moaned about that. However, there are questions that need to be answered, and they are logical questions. What has Luis Elizondo been doing for 5 years? If he ran that program that was shut down in 2012, what did he do for the DOD then? Because the way it makes it sound and the way it's been said is that he was still working on advanced aerial threats. Well, if he did, who was funding that program? And what program was it?
It's a good question. I mean, he couldn't have, I mean, he's been doing something. That's obvious. I know that's what you're getting at. That's obvious, but will we ever know what he was doing, what he was up to, who was funding him, what the agenda was? I don't think so, man. I don't think we're ever going to know that.
I don't know. I really don't. But it makes me absolutely think that there's way more to this than what we are being told. But people are so excited about the fact that disclosure has happened that they're forgetting, what the purpose is of everything. There's questions that need to be answered.
Do you know why he said he quit? Which doesn't make sense either. He said he quit because the excessive secrecy surrounding the program. And there was internal opposition. Like, in other words, they couldn't wait to come out and tell the people about it. I'm not buying that, man. I don't buy that one bit, because there's been excessive secrecy in the government for way before Roswell, and no one's ever batted an eye about it, and that's worked in the government. All of a sudden, this guy's got a conscience about it. That don't even make sense.
It doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense at all in regards to it. You know, and we'll get more into that tomorrow night on the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. Are you coming in for that? You coming in?
Yeah, man, if you want me to be there, sure. Friday nights roundtables are fun. Especially when y'all start yelling at each other and you ring bells and stuff.
Yes, I know. I do have to pick someone from our donation from the GoFundMe account, which is up to $2,150 as of today.
Awesome. Almost halfway there.
I do have to pick someone from this, because part of the agreement was if you make more than $100 donation, you can come on in and join us for the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. So I need to be able to pick someone, see who wants to come on in.
Are you going to do that now?
I'm thinking about it. It. Let's see here. So we scroll on down. Well, put it this way. Preacher donated $100, but we already know he's going to be there anyway, so he doesn't count.
You want a drum roll, Dave?
No.
Okay, I'll let it go.
Oh, I appreciate it. No, that actually sounded pretty good. Let's see here. Who do we want to... Who wants to come?
You don't have to pay Rachel, you don't have to pay $100 to be on the round table. It's just that was part of the deal on GoFundMe. There's certain levels and stuff, so.
Exactly. You know what? I'm going to see if Lita wants to come on. So Lita, if you're listening, she runs a UFO/alien chat site called alienbabble.com.
Nice.
Let me check it out. Yeah, alienbabble.com. And, you know, Lita, get a hold of me if you want to come on the round table with us tomorrow night because of your awesome $100 donation. We're going to make this happen. And, you know, I will message you after the show, and you can come on with us.
Hey, is there anything you can tell us about that? I don't know what you can and can't talk about.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can tell us about your new spots on this terrestrial stuff? I mean...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
I'm excited about it.
I don't have the stations as of yet. I'm going to keep those quiet. Okay? The stations I'm going to keep quiet. The gentleman whom I was chatting with, I met him 18 years ago when I was working on Vancouver Island, and they had brought him in as a consultant. And real good dude, we hit it off, and then radio is radio. You just kind of, you know, lose touch. But you never forget a voice.
Gotcha.
And so just out of the blue, much like I did with Bumblefoot, I messaged him about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And his name is Matt. And Matt said to me, sent me an email, and basically it had 2 words on it that said, "Call me." So I did. And then he says to me, boy, he goes, you know, you could not have picked a better guy to call about this. And I kind of laughed and I said, why is that? He goes, do you know, I've been listening to Coast to Coast for the last 20-some years, 5 to 6 nights a week. And I have been waiting for a Canadian journalist to take on this type of programming. He goes, I'm very excited about it. I want to talk with you. When can you get down to the Lower Mainland? I said, well, I'm heading down to the Lower Mainland, which is the Vancouver area, for Christmas, because my parents are down there. He goes, let's meet up the day after Christmas. So we met up on December 26th, Boxing Day. You don't have Boxing Day down there, do you?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yep.
But you don't get the day off. It's not a holiday.
No, it's not something that people know, but we recognize it, but not as like a day off type holiday.
All right. For most of us up here, it's a holiday. Unless you work, in some sort of retail business, then it's usually not. But for me, it was a holiday. And so, long story short, him and I go in. We met for about 2.5, 3 hours. And we were going over the insights of the show and what we wanted to accomplish and what we wanted to do, where we wanted to take the show. And so we literally, discussed a number of options. We even discussed changing the name of the show.
Oh, really?
We did. And I have no options right now because I'm kind of addicted to SOR, But he said, one of the things you have to do in radio, and I agreed with him, is we have to take a look at absolutely everything, from the way the programming is done, to the name of the show, to, how are we going to get it out there? Which is why, I told him about our awesome listeners, and I told him about how I would much prefer to keep the Spaced Out Radio name because we're gaining a lot of traction with that. But a lot of people need to understand that when it comes to the name, and I'm not saying we're changing it. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But he asked me a point-blank question, and I didn't know the answer to it, which was, do you think you can sell Spaced Out Radio to the mainstream? Because we have a real alternative name. That's a difficult question.
Yeah, he's looking at it as a product, basically, is what he's looking at it
absolutely. Absolutely. But I said for the genre we're in, I think it works.
Well, the proof should be in the pudding, as I believe you can. I mean, I even Googled Canadian Paranormal Radio, and you're in the top 5 up there already, along with Coast to Coast and all of them. So I think you can definitely sell it as a product, but I didn't go to school in marketing or business,
No, I understand. By the way, we're number 1 number 1 and 2 if you go on and Google Canadian Paranormal Radio.
Well, see, there you go.
Yeah.
So that should be, that should be a point I would make to him. I would ask you as a favor, and for some of the listeners too, try to fight to keep it. I know you're
I'm going to, because this is my baby. This is my baby. No, I didn't talk to him about gnomes, ad gnome. No, I did not. But anyways, the conversation ended like this. He wants to pick us up for his 5 stations. He wants to help us grow in syndication. He sees a real market for that. He's a very forward-thinking individual and believes that talk radio in terrestrial is not dead. In fact, he says if anything is dead in radio, it's music. Yet program directors fill things up with music because it's cheap.
That's a good point.
It's cheap. And, syndication or talk radio, they lament it because people cost money. Whereas Matt, he looks at things differently. He sees the potential of a lack of overnight quality radio outside of a few shows, which are mostly, let's face it, coast to coast. Love them or hate them. I'm still a fan. I'll go on record and say that. I'm still a fan. But, I never get to listen to them because I'm kind of on the air at the same time. But coast to coast. You got ESPN. You have a lot of other things. right? There's a lot of political talk, especially down south. Up here in Canada, most of it's all canned. So there isn't a lot of 24-hour programming live in Canada, especially in the night, which is where we fill a very good niche. However, you have to convince the people, which he has the connections to do. So the other thing we need to do as well is we need to make sure that we get that GoFundMe account going. And this is why I've been, I'm going to use a Tom DeLonge thing here. This is a telethon. We need to build this studio. We need to build this studio, and we need to build it fast, because Matt wants us on the air between mid to late January. And we have to have the technology so we can stay broadcasting on the internet, but still have the ability to broadcast on terrestrial as well. Whether that's through an IceCast or a Shoutcast or, a cloud, whatever it may be. We need to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's not easy. Not all these program directors haven't made the transition to internet radio. I know a lot of you listening, you hear some internet radio shows like Coast to Coast and stuff or whatever on terrestrial, but that's because those people have the equipment to do that. They use other systems besides IP, and a lot of those program directors, man, they can absolutely love your show, and as soon as you tell them that you got IP only, they're going to be like, So I get it, man.
Absolutely, man. And, then you look at satellite time, because the one thing that a lot of these stations cannot have is they cannot have the show breaking up. For instance, you guys heard last week, all of a sudden my computer died on me. 7 minutes into the show. That can't happen on terrestrial. It took me 7 minutes to get everything back up and running. That can't happen on terrestrial. So now what you need to do is you need to sit there and you need to, make sure you have a proper satellite feed running through a mixing board and a codec machine. Mm-hmm. Well, satellite costs $30 an hour.
Fortune.
Yeah, $30 an hour. So $90 a night. So which means I would need 2.1 stations a night to cover that cost. That's just to cover that cost. And then what we would have to do if we did any overtime, we'd have to move overtime onto Spreaker, which I'm fine with. I'm okay with that. We'll keep that part going. We can invite everybody over to Spreaker to keep on listening. That's the easy part.
And I would say this too, real quick, Dave. I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you guys, you look at all the donations, and I felt that way. I was like, man, there's people donating like $50, big time money, $100. I can't do that, and it kind of makes you not want to do it. But whatever you can help out with, help out, please, if you can. It doesn't matter the amount.
Exactly, and you know what? The one thing that I will say too, my friend, is that it is very, very, to me, a $10 donation or a $100 donation means just as much as someone who maybe doesn't have the income but still takes the time to share the post. You know what I'm saying? To share the post. So,
I'd say you guys are doing a real good job of coming together. I'm pretty impressed with everybody so far. It's your audience is something else.
Me too, my friend. They are amazing people. Michael McNeil just donated $100.
Wow.
So I think that's 78 American. Remember, we're dealing with Canadian money here, my friends. We're dealing with Canadian money. So $100 American is only like $78, $77 American. Or $100 Canadian. I got confused there. I got all excited. Joe Roop, thanks so much for being on SOR in hour number 3. Really appreciate you hopping on in. It's always a good time to have you on. Who do you have on with us Saturday night?
Jeff Harmon is going to be with us, talking all things ancient and esoteric, and maybe even reading some people's astrology charts.
Wow. Sounds good. Sounds very good. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time, 7 days a week, we get things going. Joe, you hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. He rocks us in and out of every single show. We want to say thank you as well to our guest the first 2 hours, Laura Johnston Kohl. Her book, Jonestown Survivor, An Insider's Look. She was part of the survivors of the Jonestown Massacre in 1978. What an intriguing interview. You're going to want to hear the replay on this one on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Tomorrow night on the program, I'm gathering some friends. We're going to have the SOR Paranormal Roundtable. Going to have a couple of our GoFundMe friends to come along as well for the ride. We would appreciate that. We'll see who they are. It's going to be a lot of fun. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to say thank you to everyone listening at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. But most of all, I love the people who take part in the chat rooms and on Twitter at every night. Twitter, hashtag Spaced Out Radio, in the SOR Space Travelers group, and on Spreaker. You guys are amazing. Keep doing what you do. Remember, our GoFundMe page is gofundme.com/We Own the Night. Because together, my friends, as you just heard me say, we own the night. I'll talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one. I'm out.